Welcome to the channel. Today update focus on the violence affecting the Christian communities in Nigeria, titled Christian Genocide, a crisis that has lasted for decades and counting. There are renewed calls for international action with well-meaning leaders across the globe aiming at protecting the violent communities in the country. The Christian communities back in Nigeria have paid the ultimate price for being a Christian, my brothers. Watch the update and I
Listen to
hope
this
you
statistic from
share
Open
this.
Doors. 72% of Christians murdered for their faith last year were in Nigeria. Well, finally, the Trump administration is doing something about it. Well, Mariam Waba, research analyst at FDD, joins us now. My friend, tell us the breaking details.
It's good to be with you today. Look, Nigeria is certainly getting a lot of attention, and you're probably seeing a lot of headlines about Nigeria and Christian persecution taking place in Nigeria lately, as it was recently spotted by the president and the White House. And the situation is certainly complicated, but I'm going to do my best here to kind of break down what's happening and why it's happening. Christian persecution in Nigeria tends to fall into one of two buckets. First, you have your classic Islamist jihadi forces. Here I'm talking about ISIS and ISIS offshoots and affiliates, Boko Haram, ISWAP, and the like. And here, when we're talking about these groups persecuting Christians, the classic images of, murdering Christians and kidnapping Christians should come to mind. What's interesting about the second bucket of Christian persecution taking place in Nigeria today is that it's not taking place or it's not being perpetrated by your classic Islamist jihadi groups. And here I'm specifically talking about Fulani militants. The Fulani people are an ethnic group in Nigeria. There is an estimated 16 to 20 million Fulani people. This ethnic group exists all across the Sahel, but there is a high concentration of Fulani people in Nigeria. The Fulani people are historically nomadic, meaning they're herders and they move from place to place. And historically, conflict between Fulani herders in Nigeria have come into contact with Christian farmers, which is another minority group within Nigeria. And historically, these conflicts are about resources, water resources, land resources. There's been instances of Fulani herders allowing their cattle to graze on farmland. And this is where our story begins. Unfortunately, in the last few years, we're seeing a religious undertone take place on some of these attacks by Fulani herders, and there's been an organized militia effort by these Fulani militia herders that have begun to attack Christians not just because of resources, but for their faith. And this is really where our story begins in Nigeria.
Okay, so we've documented these stories tragically a lot on CBN. I've talked to a bunch of reporters on the ground, just been sent horrific photos, it seems like on a weekly basis. And so this is something that I know I'm getting frustrated with, and my contacts in Nigeria, frustrated would not be an accurate word, of how this just keeps going on and on and on. So what is the Trump administration doing about it?
Absolutely. So the problem here, and it's one that the White House has spotlighted, is the Nigerian government has been unable and really unwilling to enforce its own laws. When you have something like continuous repeated attacks by a certain group by another group, this is really a security issue, and it's in Nigeria's best interest to begin to address the security, one, by holding perpetrators accountable, holding Fulani herder perpetrators accountable, and two, by beginning to understand how these Fulani militias are forming and beginning to dismantle them. And what the White House is trying to do with this working group that it set up on January 22nd, and by sending over US military commanders into Abuja, is to try to put some pressure on the Nigerian government and really enable them to try to enforce their own laws and begin to decrease the security gap that we're seeing take place. The other thing that the White House did is on December 25th, on Christmas Day, the president actually ordered airstrikes on an ISIS affiliate in the northwestern region of Nigeria. And it is certainly a welcome step, but I don't think it's going to holistically solve the problem here.
Yeah, I think that's the question. The bombing that you're talking about, these kind of posturing of words, like that the White House has said. My Nigerian contacts are just waiting, because it some of the well, I would say the overwhelming vibe, if you want to call it that, the overwhelming feeling is that it's getting worse. People getting abducted, pastors being killed, people being unalive, just almost on a daily basis. And it's like, okay, well, what's actually going to change? When's something going to actually tangibly happen? And so I guess maybe this is maybe a little bit more editorial. Do you think that this new group that was established, and if there's any more details about that you could give us, would be great, will actually change anything on the ground?
I do have to point out that I think we're hearing a lot more about these attacks, not necessarily because I think they're happening more frequently, but because I think after the White House spotlighted this issue, more people have been engaged in Nigeria and more people have been willing to report on these instances. So I think there's a little bit of a catch-22 here on the White House spotlighting this issue, and has the spotlight actually inflamed the issue. I think it's probably a little bit of the latter, of it being, now that we know about this issue vis-a-vis the spotlight, we're hearing more things that were happening that we weren't hearing about before the White House made it a point to begin to engage the Nigerian government. The working group is actually a step in the right direction. The working group is essentially aiming to put pressure on the Nigerian government primarily, but I think where it will be successful if we follow through on this is enabling the Nigerian government. If you look back at the early days of when the president started posting on Truth Social about this, the first reaction of the Nigerian government was that this is a security issue and we are unable or unwilling, really, to figure out how to disband these Fulani militias and hold perpetrators accountable. I think the working group, if it can establish a framework for the Nigerian military forces to be better, meaning hold perpetrators accountable, track down when Christians are kidnapped and bring them back to their communities, and then disbanding these Fulani militias, that is really moving us in the right direction. And this is no overnight fix, because it's not an overnight problem. This is years in the making, and it'll probably be years to solve. But I think we're moving in the right direction here.
Well, I sure hope so, my friend. I am sick and tired of getting WhatsApp messages from my friends in Nigeria. I'll just be. It's not. It's You almost have to like detach yourself, because I'll just get these photos with my family and my kids, and I'll look at my phone. I'm like, oh gosh, I
Yeah.
can't. It's hard. It's hard to be part of the stream of information for the past year and a half or so of people saying, "Hey, look at this kid that was just killed on the side of the road. No one's doing anything about it," and no one really seems to care. Thankfully, as you pointed out, there does seem to be a little bit of a spotlight on it. So I really hope that, as you're saying, this is the start of the changing tide. Well, we'll obviously have to have you back on to get more of your expertise. But as for now, my friend, thank you so much for coming on, and God bless.
Thank you.